Okay, and I'm back with another Spice and Wolf volume review. This time we're looking at Spice and Wolf Volume 10. And starting off, I gotta say, I love this cover. I think this was one of the first covers I ever saw. I think this was the one they showed on Crossing Void. But getting into the volume, this one might be shorter, but here's the world map. And right now we're going to Winfield. And the volume actually does start off with Lawrence and company on a boat heading towards Winfield. You know what? I also forgot to mention there's no manga counterpart for this volume. Keito decided to skip it, and by the end, I actually understand why he did. So Cole is actually scared of being on a boat. I'm pretty sure it is his first time. Polo seems actually pretty excited to see the sea. And on their way there on this boat, Lawrence and Holo talk about why they're going to Winfield and how they're going to the Abbey, the great Abbey of Brondel that is there, to find more information about the wolf bone. Holo's not too fond of going to the Abbey because, of course, she doesn't like the church. And after a few pages, they finally make it into town. It being pretty cold, you can tell by these two faces. So then Lawrence and Co. meet with the leader of this wool trading company. Lawrence tells the leader, Dutchman, about what happened in Karub, and he also asks about the Abbey. And this goes on to talk about the King of Winfield, which has no experience in business. So the country is getting poorer because of him. And that leads into merchants trying to take advantage of this situation. And that would be the Rubik Alliance, a very powerful economic alliance, which was also backed by a nobleman. And they're trying to work with the king to get the Abbey's land. And we see why they want to do this later on in the volume. The Abbey is also pretty stubborn about working with the Alliance. So after this, Lawrence and Holo go to a tavern, and Lawrence talks to some of the people there about the Abbey. They also talk about how the taxes are going up. So the next morning, Lawrence wakes up a little bit early, and he walks out of the room they are staying in for a little bit to get some water. And he also recognized that it started snowing. It seems that Holo did too, and she seems pretty mesmerized by it. I also forgot to mention that a lot of stuff is cheap in this town that they're staying in right now. So Lawrence and Co. were able to stay in a pretty nice room. And so a little bit after Holo's surprise of snow, we meet Piaski, which Dutchman sent over to Lawrence so that he could guide them to the Abbey. He's also from the Rubik Alliance. They of course go on horseback. I guess this is our first look at him too. I think Lawrence mentioned that he was dressed like Eve. So after a second day of travel, they finally make it to the Abbey. And then we finally have this scene where Lawrence feels the gaze of this shepherd on him. Lawrence, when coming to the Abbey, also thinks about Nora for a second and how she might fit in here. And after that little scene, Lawrence, 2 pages later, meets that same shepherd. His name is Huskins. Here we get a better look at him. You can tell that he's pretty old. So after spending maybe 2 days at the Abbey, Lawrence finally speaks to Piaski again, asking where he can find information about the wolf bones. He doesn't directly ask that to Piaski. He actually asks about another tale of the golden sheep, which is similar in vein to the wolf bone, and also because sheep and wolves are pretty closely related. And from that little conversation, Lawrence actually doesn't learn anything new, unfortunately. Polo kind of scolds him the next day, mostly because he got drunk. Lawrence also brings up that if she wanted to, she could just turn into her wolf form and try to search for the bones herself. But Lawrence realizes why she doesn't do that. That also being the reason why she didn't do that in the last volume, Town of Strife. Lawrence also states to Holo that the only time he can do anything for her is when she's in her human form. Lawrence also believes that Holo is scared of Lawrence leaving her because their relationship isn't mutually beneficial, just like her one in Pasloe. And Lawrence wants her to be patient a little bit longer. That's his decision, while he looks for the bone. Lawrence after this reassures Cole's role and why he's traveling with Lawrence and Holo. Cole also says that he looks up to Lawrence and maybe wants to be like him someday. It's a nice moment. And after this, Lawrence goes to speak to Piaski again about a list of the things that the Abbey has purchased in the past to maybe find out if they bought the wolf guns. But he also seems to have no luck there too. And Piaski also reveals to Lawrence why the Rubik Alliance wants the Abbey's land, and that would be to make a new home for people who had been refugees or cast out. Also mentioning war, famine, floods, or with no work or money. And Piaski is very adamant about this because he really wants to help others. Lawrence and Cole were also present for this conversation, and after it's over, Holo actually decides to go off on her own. Lawrence thinks that this is because of Piaski speaking of making a new homeland for people, and how the idea of making a new one never occurred to Holo. And Lawrence thinks she's uncertain about the feelings she has. But then Holo comes back hearing all of what Lawrence has said to Cole, meaning that she really never left in the first place. And Lawrence learns that this was set up by Holo, and she got Cole to help her with this. Holo also suggests that they leave. Holo doesn't want Lawrence to put himself in danger. That's mainly the reason why she wants to leave now. And actually after this, Lawrence goes to talk to Piaski about them leaving, and then a blizzard decides to come through, delaying their leave for maybe a few days. And after that takes place, that night, Huskins appears at Lawrence's door, his face covered in ice. He was outside in the blizzard, it seemed, and Huskins, while at the door, sees Holo's ears and tail. And we see why Holo didn't decide to hide her ears and tail. And we find out because Huskins himself is a sheep, and Huskins finally asks Lawrence if he can have a favor. Huskins explains how he found a messenger that was traveling through this blizzard that had a letter on him, but he had already died. Pretty dark actually. And Huskins tells Lawrence why he came to him, telling Holo that both his and her strength mean nothing in this situation. Huskins also keeps treating Holo like a child. Huskins also wants Lawrence to protect the Abbey. That's his favor he's asking. Huskins also starts talking to Holo about his past and how he was scattered by the moon hunting bear, him and his people, and how he made the Abbey to be as a home, a new home. And we finally reveal what the letter is, that being a notice of taxation. As Lawrence is thinking if he should accept or not this favor, Holo speaks for him and she says no. Lawrence noticed that she's speaking this way because of jealousy, jealous of Huskins because he had a home. Holo also knows that she's being very childish right now. Huskins asks Holo if her homeland was destroyed. Huskin also talks about how he's gotten this far and how the moon hunting bear destroyed his home, and how he's even eaten meat of his own sheep kind to live among the humans. And upon hearing this, Holo looks to the meat that she was eating and she throws up. Huskins also adds onto this by saying that he's given up much so that he may live in peace. And after this, Holo starts crying. Huskins understands that Holo doesn't want to part with Lawrence, but he also doesn't want to part with his home. This whole section hurts so much. I think it's easily the best part of this volume too. I almost cried reading this too. So much emotion in these few pages. And after this, Lawrence actually decides to go through with it. He then meets Piaski to sell him on this plan that he has, which he needs the Rubik Alliance's help. And Holo and Lawrence also get a surprise visit from two monks looking for that letter that Huskins gave Lawrence. And they do a whole inspection on the room they're in, and they pat down both Lawrence and Holo. And Lawrence and Holo do this little trick. Holo falls over after she was already searched for the letter. And because Lawrence had the letter on him, Holo, while Lawrence is catching her, Holo somehow gets the letter from his jacket. And Lawrence doesn't even notice this at the time, but you can tell by their eyes that they were signaling something to each other. It's a cool moment. And after this, Lawrence and Holo meet with the nobles at the top of the Ruvik Alliance. Lawrence during this also has to prove himself to them that he's serious about all of this. And he has to stab his left hand, I think, showing that he's not just some random lowly merchant. Lawrence shows them the letter and it doesn't seem like it's enough to convince them. And that was finally the straw for the nobles to speak up about this. And they say that they were waiting for someone younger to reach the same conclusion that they did. They also say that they got word that the Abbey had purchased the Wolfbone. And after this little gamble goes down, and Huskins also helps with this last part. It's a little bit much for me to explain all of it right now, so I'll just go to the end. And coming to an end of this volume, Holo and Lawrence are separated for a little bit. And Holo finds out that the wolf bones are fake. Holo's saying that they were probably from a stag and that they were quite old. And that's where the volume ends. You know, I think this volume might be the longest. I think it is up till this point. It did feel long when reading it. It was pretty good though. I didn't expect it to be as good, but with that Holo moment, it gave Holo some character development. And Lawrence. I really didn't expect that from this volume. And now I understand why Kaito decided to skip this in the manga. Because the wolf bones don't really amount to nothing, or chasing after them don't. That's why he omits them from Town of Strife in the manga. You do miss this very good character moment from Holo. But that was actually longer than I expected, but it is a very long volume. I think the next one is like 200 pages, and it's also a side colors volume. But I think I'm going to end today's review here. So thanks for watching and tune in next time to see what happens in volume 11.